Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj really fit the description that Srila Prabhupada gives of a great soul. That according to the circumstances, they can be hard as a thunderbolt or soft as a rose. When the need was there was no one in the entire International Society for Krishna Consciousness that I have ever heard of that could be more like a thunderbolt than Goswami Maharaj. He could be so strong, so strict, that people would tremble in fear in his presence. But simultaneously, his heart was so soft, it was so loving, it was so generous, it was so humble. That was his nature. And Srila Prabhupada saw those qualities in him and personally energized him and empowered him to be his personal representative. I believe it was in Germany that Srila Prabhupada actually entrusted Goswami Maharaj to be the first Western person in history to install deities of Radha and Krishna in a temple on his behalf. Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj was one of the devotees who lived in abject poverty, facing all kinds of diseases and difficulties, to establish Sri Sri Radharas Bihari Temple in Juhu. He and His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj were a team. They would go out to preach, to raise funds, and also to bring people to meet Srila Prabhupada and become members of our society. Srila Prabhupada had a very, very great desire to start a center in Mayapur. There was a piece of land that Srila Prabhupada really wanted to purchase. Srila Prabhupada sent some of his best men who were in India to purchase that property. But there was such opposition. It appeared impossible. Goswami Maharaj personally told me this story. That night, he said that Prabhupada sent devotees, and the parties that were opposing Prabhupada to buy that land, they convinced the owners of the land not to sell it to us. They convinced our own lawyers that we shouldn't buy it. And they even convinced every devotee that went on behalf of Prabhupada that they shouldn't buy it. In Mayapur, Sripad Brahmanand Prabhu, one of the senior-most members of our society, with tears in his eyes, he told me the reason why Srila Prabhupada asked Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj to go to Mayapur is Prabhupada knew that no one else in the whole world could do it except him. Prabhupada gave him the money. He taught him how to tie it with a piece of cloth like a dhoti to make like a money belt to wrap around him, because he knew there would be all kinds of dacoits and robbers in this area. And he went persistently for days. Although there was every type of opposition, he had to oppose our own lawyers, the people wanting to sell the land, and he convinced everybody that it must be done. And then when it came time for the transaction, they were sitting in this little office, dirty little office. And because it was a large sum of money, the persons who were buying the land, who were farmers, they had several people with spears to guard anyone from taking the money from them. And they had the lawyer from the other side, every single rupee note. They had to copy by hand the entire serial number. It took hours and hours and hours. Finally, the deed for that property was in Goswami Maharaja's hands. And he immediately went back to Calcutta, where Srila Prabhupada was waiting. He came in the very middle of the night. Every single devotee was sleeping. The entire temple was pitch dark, but there was one light on in Srila Prabhupada's room. Goswami Maharaj came in, offered his prostrated obeisances. Srila Prabhupada immediately smiled and said, "I have been waiting for you." What happened? This historical event. Goswami Maharaj handed the deed to the land in Mayapur to Srila Prabhupada and said, "Srila Prabhupada, the land is yours." Prabhupada got up with tears in his eyes and embraced him and said, "Thank you very much. Now you should go take rest."
You were listening to Radhanath Swami on devotionalnectar.com.